Well, hey, howdy everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John. How's it going, guys?
It's
Just
going.
finished my Richard Simmons deal a meal lunch. I'm good.
In the pre-show, we were talking about the different uh, fad, sort of scammy kind of weight loss programs that kind of make the circulation. And I mentioned that in the 80s, I had a family member who was subscribed to the Richard Simmons Deal a Meal. And so I'm going to have to go back and do some research to see what that included. But anyway, getting back on track, in today's episode, we are talking about how to forecast your marketing budget. The best ways to forecast your marketing budget to get some good outcomes, what to do with the forecast for planning your budget allocation, and an example of how forecasting earned a client more than 29% revenue. So, a real case study on how this works. So, Chris, where do you want to get started today?
Let's get started with what it is that we would want to be forecasting as a good place to start. Remember that with all data, if you have data that includes a time series component, like the date of something, you can forecast it. Right? So that's the minimum requirements. You have numeric data and you have a date, and if you have enough of that data, you can forecast using the machine learning or predictive analytics or data science tools of your choice. There's so many to choose from on the market now. What you do is you get all your data probably into something like a spreadsheet, or maybe you extract it straight from a system like Google Analytics, and then you feed it to the software. And the general rule of thumb is for every 4 periods you have of data, you can project 1 period forward. So if you have 4 quarters of data, you can project a quarter forward. If you have 4 years of data, you can project a year ahead. You can do projections with less back data, but they do get increasingly unstable the longer out they go. So like if you have a year of data, you can forecast a year ahead, but the data that you're going to get towards the end of that forecast is much less reliable. It's kind of like, if you think about it, you can pretty reliably forecast tomorrow's weather. I mean, less so these days, thanks to climate change. But in general, it's easier to know what the weather's probably going to be tomorrow than it is in a week, a month, and certainly in 6 months. We have no idea what the weather's going to be, except that we're pretty sure it's going to be warm.
I've always, wondered about, taking a year's worth of data and forecasting it forward for the next year. Because to me, when I hear that, that assumes that this year is going to be identical to last year. And I know that is maybe the only thing I know for certain is that that is not going to be the case. I don't know what's going to be different, but I know that something's going to be different. So I personally don't feel comfortable forecasting that far out with pretty much anything.
And that's a reasonable precaution to take. Now, the challenge for a lot of marketers is that the tools we normally use don't have forecasting built into them, right? We have, of course, our good old friend Google Analytics. And it does have a little bit of anomaly detection stuff, but really forecasting is kind of absent from here. There are other tools that do incorporate a certain level of forecasting and predictive analytics. Our friends over at Talkwalker, for example, have the ability to do forecasting on particular trends. And I can show you a very quick example of that. Let's do Google Analytics 4 as a example. And as you would expect, there's a decent amount of data because this has been a discussion topic for a while. And then what it will do is it will produce a forecast of all of the mentions of this on search and social and stuff like that. And then you can see an additional, in this case, this forecast is built out, looks like about a little bit more than a month of where it thinks it's going to go. So there are some tools on the market now that are starting to have that the forecasting capability built into them, but it's still very difficult to find something off the shelf. One of the things we tend to do for ourselves actually is to take data from systems we know and use machine learning tools to do that forecasting. That way, we kind of know we have some control over what the forecasting is. which is important. And we have a sense of, okay, well, what are the things that we would want to be able to forecast forward? So let's take a quick look at an example. Let's look at our friend Google Analytics. We'll look at just the Trust Insights website. Where did I put that? That went to the wrong window. There we go. So this is based on, I think I had set to 3 years, but this is the estimated number of sessions to our website. Now, here's an important caveat with forecasting. The data has to have cyclicality and seasonality. It has to have patterns in the back data. If there's no patterns, you can't forecast something, right? I would not even wager even a dime to try and forecast, say, the 2024 presidential election. We have no data for it, and previous elections don't count. So with this, because we're a B2B company, we're a consulting firm, our data has clear patterns in it. And our data has patterns from, when people are on vacation and things like that. So this is what our year could look like, probably will look like based on a few years of past data. We've been fortunate enough to have Google Analytics installed on our site since October of 2020. So we have a lot of data to go back to.
It's interesting because I look at this, I'm like, yep, so beginning of the year, everybody's trying to figure things out. They kind of cool it a little bit in February as they have all these new plans and strategies that they're trying to figure out how to execute. So they're not looking at anybody else but themselves. Then you have July when everybody's on vacation. And those are the two dips, February and July. Totally makes sense. But then you have end of year when all of that planning starts again and they're looking for resources, free templates, all those things. And we start to come back up in search. So it's like, okay, I can understand the cyclicality and seasonality of our numbers. And these are estimated numbers. And whether or not we hit these numbers month over month is really going to depend on what it is we're doing. Because we could, I could go back historically and look, well, did we release a new paper or did we release a new book or webinar or something that maybe accounted for a spike in November last year, but didn't happen the prior 2 years? And that sort of goes back to my comment of, yeah, I can sort of trust it this far out if we are behaving identically to how we've behaved before.
Exactly, or at least similar enough. And there is some good evidence that we're pretty predictable. I mean, us personally, as well as the industry as a whole.
Sure.
The next thing to do is, if we want to break this down, Google Analytics 4, if you have configured it properly and you're using good tagging and governance, you can extract out the default channel groupings. So we are familiar with default channel groupings. If we go into the advertising menu here and go into conversion paths, we can see the default channel groupings: email, organic search, organic social, and the role that they play. So in addition to having this information, we can now start to forecast out, what does this look like? We know without a doubt that email is our single largest channel, our single largest driver of every kind of conversion. And so when we go into our data and we can forecast just the email portion of our traffic, we can say, okay, well, there's some peaks and valleys here. That big dip in February, that's from email. That's from previous years. We forgot, maybe, I don't know what we did wrong with email in February's past, but that's sort of what's been forecast. Now, the question to ask logically is, well, we look at this forecast, we don't have to accept it. Okay, well, this is just what's going to happen. We can say, well, maybe we don't want a big dip from our email in February. Maybe we want to try and patch that hole. So Katie, when you see that as a decision maker, you see, looks like we got some rough sailing in February and July. What are your inclinations for trying to fix that?
Well, I mean, you're going in assuming that we've done something wrong. I know our company, and I know that we consistently send out, our email newsletters. So I definitely don't think it's a matter of us forgetting. I would actually put money that we did not forget to send the email. That is the one thing we are 100% consistent on. I would take a look at other factors. So back to sort of, the overall traffic, are people, is this like the season of unsubscribe? are people getting too many newsletters from, us and everyone else? But then I would also want to look at the actual content that we created in those particular issues to say, how is this different than other months where, we had a higher number of sessions coming to our site from email? What's the difference? Were we, going too hard on promoting and not enough on just, hey, here's some helpful stuff, or vice versa? And so I think it's not as easy as looking at this going, okay, email's broken, we got to fix it. There's a lot of different layers to understanding it. So as the decision maker, to your question, Chris, my first question is, well, what kind of content do we produce in February, that's not necessarily converting to, people coming to our website, and or what are the other things that are happening in February outside of email that may be, is it just email or is it the month of February in general?
Those are good questions. It is not just the month of February in general. So if we take a look at organic social data, February's it's off to a slow start there, but then we see this ramp up throughout the year. We do see that dip in July, but social media, organic social. Now this by the way includes our free Slack community, Analytics for Marketers. We bundle that into organic social, and so this would include, and we've made some really big strides in the last year and a half of trying to improve the quality of that community and also the traffic that we get from it. So that's organic social. If we look at organic search, yeah, February is a bit low there, but then so is April, and so on and so forth. And then if we look in on referral traffic actually goes the opposite way. January and February are great months for referral traffic, and then the rest of the year kind of falls off a cliff. We know have a pretty good idea of what's going on here behind the scenes, but the different channels do differ. Now, the thing that's important to then remember is to look at something like your attribution analysis and say, well, which channels are responsible for a certain types of conversions? This is for people filling out forms on our website, right? Email is priority number 1. Organic search is actually priority number 5. Referral traffic is priority number 2. So when we look at this referral traffic chart, we go, wow, we got to be real careful the second half of the year that the things that we do in the beginning of the year, we keep doing those things to keep driving that referral traffic.
Yeah, I think that we all, and not us exclusively, I mean, like all of us, in the industry, like beginning of the year, we're all hyped up, want to do stuff. And then, Q2 rolls around and we're all tired already.
I'm tired already, and it's January 12th.
John, when you look at this, when you look at all of this data, what questions do you start to ask?
Well, on the email side, it's definitely, you just want to dive in over there and look at, okay, what are the opens? What are the clicks? What content is working? There's a bunch of questions on that front. The referral traffic is the one that really jumped out at me as interesting, though, to see it so high in January and then kind of languish for like the whole rest of the year. Like you presume that you've got August and December are going to be dead, so that's fine. But I don't know, it almost strikes me as like this one is, there's definitely learning here. It's kind of like a net promoter, it's, if somebody's willing to pass that traffic on, what's the idea behind that? And I don't know, and you guys are both, more adept at GA classification than me as far as this stuff. What would be the valves to turn on or the actions to take to try and improve this one?
Referral traffic is all about getting traffic from places that aren't search engines, not social networks, and not ad systems, right? So this is guest placements on podcasts. This is guest blog posts. This is speaking at events, right? Where people, the event has a listing on their site. This is any place where you can get traffic where someone's clicking through from somewhere else that, again, is not a search engine, a social media site, or an ad system. So wherever else that we could get people, referring other people to us would be the important thing. This may mean, having our team go out and start sourcing guest podcast speaking opportunities, particularly in May, which is really low, August, and then December. But I would say May and August would be prime times to say, okay, let's go hit the podcast circuit. Maybe, last August, for example, we released our private social media communities paper. We did a really good job promoting that to our audience through email and stuff like that. We did a not at all good job of reaching out to fellow podcasters and YouTubers and Twitch folks and doing interviews and saying, hey, you should pay attention to this thing.
Yeah, it's, without getting too far down a rabbit hole, we're not great at that piece of promotion in terms of referral. So when we release a new paper or, article or book or whatever, we don't then also pitch it around to say, do you want Katie or Chris as a guest on your show to talk about this thing? And so, that's something that we should be rolling into our plan as we are, trying to scale. And that would hopefully increase some of these metrics, but doing it in a way that is a little bit more consistent and not just paying attention to, May and August, but so that you have a little bit more of, a consistent number across month over month.
Another thing that's important to do is to look at where your referral traffic is coming from, right? So this is from our December report. Where are we currently getting referral traffic, and is there opportunity to get more from those sources? So we see Social Media Pulse, that community. That's an online community that is run by our friends over at Agora Pulse. Could we do more there? Sure. We could post a lot more there than we currently do, which is none. And stuff like that. Scott Brinker's Martech, Chief Martech website. Could we do more there? Sure. Pitching out the Martech 9000. We did a lot of stuff with that in, sort of the middle of last year, but then we kind of didn't really pick up and run with it. Doing more things with our friends over at Talkwalker, doing more stuff on LinkedIn. So there's opportunities. And looking at your data, once you've seen the forecast, you then, to what Katie was saying earlier, you then have an idea of what levers should I pull. And existing site traffic from places you're already getting referral traffic is a very straightforward lever.
Can you go back a chart? So it's interesting. When I look at this one, this again sort of goes back to my question of what else is happening. So in order for us to get referral traffic, we are then dependent on other sites, other podcasters, other things for that traffic to come through. And I know anecdotally that May and August are some of the peak conference season months. And so people are traveling, people aren't necessarily recording. And if they are, they're releasing them on a delayed schedule in June, July, and then September, October. And so it makes me wonder, how much of this is in our control when we are dependent on other marketers to be promoting us in their stuff because, they're wrapped up in preparing for their conferences or, maybe they bank, 10 interviews in February and release them over time. And so ours will hit in, July and so we still sort of miss that window.
And that's a very good point. So that's where things like your attribution analysis really do come in handy because some stuff is under your control. Some stuff isn't. Referral isn't really under your control, right? You can do your best to pitch things out, but something big comes out and pretty much everybody gets distracted by the shiny object. Right now, literally everybody. In fact, I got a request this morning from an event I'm speaking at saying, "Hey, can you talk about ChatGPT in your talk?" I'm like, sure. I mean, I can make the whole talk about that if you want. But it's not under our control. We have some level of control, some with social media in terms of what we post, how often we post and things like that. We have no control over the algorithm. The various algorithms on those services. We do have some control over things like who we follow and how often we follow people, but that's about it. With organic search, you have almost no control, right? You can put up good content, you can get links to it, and that's about it. The rest is in the hands of the machines, and we have no idea what happens after that. Google just released their new webmaster guidelines about a month and a half ago, and there's new stuff in there now that you have to obey, for lack of a better word, to do well. Things like email, you have a lot of control over email. It's one of the reasons why it's such a dominant force with our marketing. You choose who to send to, you choose what to send. People subscribe to it, and as long as you're not sending garbage to those people, they tend to stick around. And so you choose your promotion schedule, you choose what goes in every newsletter. So there's a lot of control there. SMS messaging, you have a lot of control over. John's been running the marketing over coffee text line now for quite some time. Private social media communities, you have a lot of control, right? When you're in analytics for marketers, we decide what the question of the day is. We decide if we're going to run a contest of some kind. There's all sorts of things. So I think scoring the different channels that you have access to as and the level of control you have over the outcomes is a really good exercise.
So where does the budget fit into all of this?
The budget fits into this in two different places. The first is for channels which are paid. Obviously, we don't do a whole lot of paid advertising. In fact, we do pretty much none. If this chart were say a paid email slide where it was like, okay, here's what we're paying. And you could forecast, you could say, hey, February and July look weak. You could say, okay, well, then let's look at our budget allocation for the year. And maybe if we rescale what we're doing budgetarily to be sort of the inverse of this, like let's spend more at the weak spots, maybe we could reverse that. So one of the things that we talked about this earlier and said, okay, well, let's say on any given month, you're going to spend 50% of your budget for that month. Right. So it's a given. You're going to spend a certain amount of money every month just because you have to. You're always on ads, things like that. If you take those activity bars, right, your likely what's likely to happen, what's not likely to happen, and you essentially invert it and rescale it, you get okay, how much effort should I be putting into payment, right? Maybe I should spend more, and 84% of my budget this month, or 86% of my budget this month, or however much. And so that's where the budget comes into play. For anytime you're spending hard dollars, look at the channels. But even when you're not, even if you're just looking at effort, right? So this is, we look at organic search. If I have 20 hours to allocate to organic search in terms of time, how much should I allocate? How much should I push towards in any given month? Or even every given week? Like, should I put 10 hours this week into optimizing your content, or should I put in 5? By essentially inverting the forecast, if our goal is to minimize those losses, this is how you would do it. You'd say, okay, let's do less or more. A really good example of this, and I don't have a slide because it's still under NDA, is we were working with a casino a couple of years ago, and they provided us the daily gambling floor revenues for the casino every day for I think they had 5 years worth of data. And they said, we want to know what's going to happen using these types of predictive analytics so we can plan promotions so that we don't have big gaps in revenue. So we ran the forecast and we gave them 15 days of the year. These are the 15 days that are going to be the weakest. And you're just going to lose money those days. They said, great. We're going to plan promotions for the week of those 15 days that were above and beyond what they had already planned. They did so, and they did a very good job. They used the loyalty mechanisms in their mobile apps and stuff like that. And at the end of the year, when we looked back, year over year, for the same machines, the same tables and stuff like that, they had earned 29% more revenue by running promotions when things were weakest.
I would imagine that, so we don't have that type of granular data, and we also don't run that kind of a business. If we were to break down the customer lifetime value, and get really granular for what is the value of any given visitor to our website? It would take some calculationing. Wow. It would take some calculations on our part, but we could do it. And then that would help us get to, for those, marketers who are being asked, but tell me the exact amount of money that you have to spend on search versus email. If you have the data to calculate customer lifetime value and then can drill down all the way down to, here's what, a single user to our website is worth. Here's what an email open is worth. Here's what, so on and so forth. Then you can get really granular The other side of this is you have to have that flexibility and that agility to be able to adjust your budget. And so a lot of organizations don't have that. It's like the budget is set on January 1 and that's it. They can't adjust it up or down. John, do you run into this when you're talking with other companies when, you're suggesting, predictive might be a good solution and, do they say, oh, that would be wonderful. We can do that. Or things have been set in stone for 18 months. We can't change it.
Yeah, that's one of the, it tends to just match as far as company size, right? The bigger the organization, the more the concrete sets. And it's always exciting to have the startups that are like, yeah, sure, we can, up the budget on the ad campaigns tomorrow, as opposed to, the groups that are like, yeah, no, the TV ads have to be 2 months in production. So money available today is not going to make any difference until, next quarter. So yeah, there's always a challenge with that. But I think, just knowing where you're at and, what you should, at least how you should be adjusting still puts you ahead of the game. It's better than just, flatlining your budget and praying that works. Another question with that though, like the casino example is interesting just in that they wanted to buoy the days they knew were the worst, but that you still have the question of like, well, if we had done that same promotion on better days, would we still have gotten the lift? There's kind of the assumption that you're doing your worst on those lowest selling days, and that's the best place to put the money. Does that tend to track from other stuff that we've seen? Because obviously it does seem to make sense intuitively. And you don't have this problem if you have a capacity issue. Like we at Trust Insights would have, like there's certain times of the year where we don't want to be promoting or pushing because there's more work in the pipe than we know what to do with, and so you always do want to fill in the lower capacity times.
Well, that's a strategy question, right? It boils down to, do you bolster your weaknesses or do you double down on your strengths? And there is no one answer to decide, that's a strategic question, depending on how strong your strengths are and how weak your weaknesses are, right? So when we look at something like referral traffic, in our case, yeah, it's pretty weak, but it's also relatively small numbers. When you look at, okay, well, how much traffic are we talking about? Is it relevant? Yes. But our strength is in our email marketing. So if I had 10 hours of time to allocate to something, I might allocate, I might redo these charts as a stacked bar percentage, like, okay, of 100% of work units that week, maybe I might allocate, 4 or 5% to referral traffic and the other 70 to email marketing.
But then you start to get into the situation of the attribution, like what is this channel doing? Is it driving awareness? Is it driving engagement? And so you have to, where I would sit, I would have to add on that layer of, okay, great, email is our strongest channel. So I don't want to adjust what you're doing. I actually need you to focus on referral because it's our weakest, because awareness is one of our issues that we're trying to resolve. And so it would be a different conversation depending on where in the funnel all of those channels fit.
Exactly. And so there aren't black and white answers to these questions. They are dependent on your strategy and what you know about your company. That's one of the reasons why I am very hesitant to just suggest anyone just blindly trust what comes out of a predictive algorithm, because you've got to know the circumstances, the data behind it, the anomalies have happened in the past. A real simple one is you might have what looks like a down month, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's right, that was the month we forgot to put Google Analytics on the new site relaunch, so there's no data, right? So it's a bunch of zeros. Knowing that, you also know that you have to do some feature engineering and some cleaning on the data, because it's not reliable.
I think, John, you were probably going to say the same thing I did. We have a question from Shane. Sorry, John, we're covering your face. How much data would one need to make a viable forecast? I'm a smaller company and this would be useful, but I don't know if that I have enough data to make this a viable option for myself. Well, go ahead.
It kind of goes back to what we said at the beginning of the show. It's sort of a 4-to-1 ratio, 3-to-1 ratio, 4-to-1 ratio. If you have 4 months of data, you can forecast a month ahead. If you have 4 years of data, you can forecast reliably a year ahead. with the caveat that there may be seasonalities, and there are an increasingly large number of black swans swimming around, right? So this time last year, a whole bunch of folks were looking at Russia putting an awful lot of troops along its borders, and fast forward to in about 6 weeks from today last year, Russia did a full-scale illegal invasion of Ukraine, right? That threw the entire everyone's forecast right out the window, right? If you're building your forecast in January 2020, looking for how's the year going to go, and you're like, oh look, as of April 1, we're all just in our basements in our pajamas and not leaving for our house for the next 2 months. So. But yeah, 3 to 1, 4 to 1 is generally a good ratio of if you have for how much data you have in the past versus how much you can forecast forward and have statistical relevance, assuming again there's cyclicality and seasonality in the data.
And I apologize, John, I cut you off. I want to make sure you get your point out.
No worries. There's a killer point in there of having that attribution analysis done, because we've seen this tons of times where you've got a client and they're, say, advertising on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And for some reason, they're all wound up about Instagram and the campaign's there. And they're like, okay, we're getting more budget. It's all going there. And we go back and do the analysis. And we're saying, look, even if you increased your Instagram ads 20 times, like, it's still not even going to be like a third of your link. I'm getting choked out. A third of your LinkedIn ads. We see campaigns that it's not worth the effort to try and double or triple, unless that, hey, we've only tried 5 ads and we've only spent a couple $100 and we want to jump up to the $2,000 a month level to make something work. But a lot of times we see people chasing goals that, we're like, no, you need to put that money in another channel. Like a great example is we see a lot of customers where they need to be doubling down on email. Like, we just know that, hey, everybody in your space is killing it with email and you're not. So it's pretty obvious that you need to put the money there. So stop, working on your latest TikTok video and, go chase real money that could make a difference.
I was going to say with that, when we first started Trust Insights 5 years ago, we didn't have any data of our own because we had literally just started. So we didn't have anything we could forecast with. And so we were more reliant on third-party data sources. And so if you are, like Shane, you're a small company, you don't feel like you have enough of your own data, think about what's the question you're trying to answer. Am I trying to understand, when's a good time to be pitching my services? Am I trying to understand, when people are going to be searching for an organization like mine? There's a few different ways that you can approach that using third-party data, such as the Bureau of Labor Statistics, other financial data that I'm sure Chris can rattle off a few sources. Google Trends is one that we always go back to because that's really helpful to understand search.
It's also, it seems paradoxical, but it's not when you think about it. It's the further up the funnel you go, the easier it is to forecast because you have more data, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a consulting firm and your sales cycle is 6 months, right, it is basically going to be 6 months before we have any data to look at whatsoever, much less be able to forecast. But you can look at website traffic today, right? As long as you're getting like anyone visiting your website, you can start forecasting. One of the things that we recommend strongly to people that we're building out their Google Analytics is you have conversions at each layer of your funnel. You have an awareness conversion, which in our case is a new user. You have an engagement conversion, like a subscription to a newsletter. And then, yes, you have your money conversion. Hey, I want to talk to John Wall today. That's your money conversion. You may not have enough data in the lower funnel conversions, but basic logic, right? If your website gets no traffic, nothing's going to flow down the funnel, right? Call it a customer journey, call it whatever you want. The reality is if no one visits your website, no one knows who you are, you're not going to get any leads, right? It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So you can look at data further up the funnel and forecast faster with that. So when we look, for example, we were looking at, this is the thank you pages on the Trust Insights website, right? This is the people who've gone and done something, and there are a number of sources and mediums in there. If you look at just new users, what gets new people in the door, period, We see similar sources, but not identical ones. But there's more things to work with. For example, we see for just getting new people, YouTube is actually fairly high up on the list, right? And so shows like this, it may not be yet showing up here, right, in our conversions, but it for sure is getting people in the door. And then we have to obviously work to say, okay, well, how do we now persuade somebody to go from awareness of us for that YouTube traffic to signing up for the newsletter, joining the Slack community, and so on and so forth. And then eventually calling John Wall to see, if John can get you in a car today.
I think we should, we've been talking about the John Wall dance, and so maybe we make the John Wall dance the opening page on our YouTube channel just to keep people engaged and get them in.
I'll have to call Paula Abdul and work up a routine.
You could. So, that's another aspect for Shane's question is, if you don't have those bottom of the funnel metrics in sufficient quantity to do a reliable forecast, step further up in the funnel and see what do you have to work with. Where could you be getting traffic from that results in an awareness level conversion. One of my favorites is brand organic search, right? Organic search traffic in general. We like organic search traffic. We like people searching for us by name. So we want to see more of that. For our awareness, we have these newsletters. We have different websites. What can we do then to improve our referring traffic sources? This is this Marketing Over Coffee podcast. We should probably do something with that.
John Wall slacking again.
I'm glad to see that on there. At least we don't have to justify the existence of the podcast. It's still doing something.
So if we bring this back to budget, so now we're talking about attribution analysis and sort of understanding which channels. So, let's say I'm focused solely on awareness and I want to allocate most of my budget to driving awareness because we know once people come into our ecosystem, they do fairly well with staying engaged and then deciding that they want to work with us. So what I would do with this is I would say, all right, I know the 2 different email newsletters that we have are driving a really good amount of awareness. Cool. Where I would start to focus is what are some maybe quick wins that I could do looking from the bottom up to say, all right, what has stopped working that I can then, reallocate funds towards. So Facebook, we don't really do a lot with Facebook for Trust Insights in general, but I might look at, Inbox Insights, our LinkedIn version of our newsletter. Is there more promotion we can be doing that? So we've been posting it consistently, but, is there a better way to write up the social post so that people know what this thing is about? That seems like low-hanging fruit. We looked at the, Marketing Over Coffee podcast. We have the Marketing AI Institute, our friends over there, marketing profs, people that we know. Is there more that we could be doing there to be boosting these numbers, knowing that our email newsletters are already pretty strong? So that's the way I would look at this in terms of allocating budget. I always go from the bottom up. What are the quick wins that we can get to boost these numbers versus monkeying with the things at the top that are already working?
And that's where attribution analysis also comes in handy. If you are spending 20% of your budget on Facebook and Facebook is yielding 0.54% of your conversions, you know that you are over-indexed, right? You know you are spending way more than you're getting on that. And that's an important part of this of budget forecasting, is to look at the results you're getting and say, are they commensurate with the investment that you're making? If you're spending, 5% of your budget or your staff time on email, but you're getting 25% of your conversions, you've understaffed email. Right? You've not got enough people working at it. You're not sending enough email because it's clearly a channel that will work for you. A real good example on this chart is Bing, right? We spend 0% of our time optimizing for Bing, right? 0, and yet it's still delivering new visitors. Now, organic search is different because if you optimize for one search engine, you tend to optimize for all of them as long as you're following best practices. But this is a case where that might be an opportunity. We look at something like the Marketing AI Institute. There's 0.89% of conversions came from that, but we haven't really done very much since the Maycon conference. if we invested writing a one guest blog post a month for them, or maybe just had ChatGPT do it for us, would that yield a greater amount of results, right? So to your point, Katie, there may be little diamonds in the rough in here, and if we put in just a little bit more effort and some assistance with our AI friends, could we see commensurately larger results? One of the things that again, is that low-hanging fruit in terms of content production. If you have a referral traffic situation like we do, where it's like, yeah, we kind of really want our referral traffic to go better. Well, what are some easy ways to get additional referral traffic? Guest posts, right? And we do So What every single week, most weeks, except for holidays. If we took the transcript from So What, chunked it up, and said, okay, well, this section of the show was really good, throw that into OpenAI's GPT model and say, just turn this into an article, and then shop that around. It's still our words, it's still our ideas, it's still our thinking, it's just put into a different format. That's a low effort, low investment way to create content that we could then place for referral traffic, hopefully, and see if it does well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunity when we start to look at this. And this is the point that I was making in this past week's newsletter, on Inbox Insights. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, it's trustinsights.ai/newsletter that you can find. That as a weekly email that you'll get perspective from myself and Chris. And I was talking about how we tend to get impatient and impulsive, and we don't want to take the time. Like, we've been talking about this data for almost 40 minutes now. And, that's not a long time, in the general scheme of thing. But what we've seen and what we've experienced and what we've done ourselves is we don't want to do this work. We don't want to pick apart the data points to really understand where we could be, making real change. We want to just do things. We want to take action. We want to, shoot first, ask questions later, which is not a great tactic or strategy if you are hyper focused on getting results from the actions that you're taking. And so this is the work that you need to do upfront. You need to set aside some of your budget to invest time into understanding the data so that you know what happened, what's going on, so that you can make those decisions to say, you know what, we thought that email was the way that we should go, but now with a deeper look, we actually see that there's a lot of referral opportunities in terms of driving awareness, as opposed to just doubling and tripling down on email. Because, what if we start, losing our audience? Well, then we focused on all the wrong things, and now it's going to take us even longer to gain those other channels back that we've been ignoring.
Exactly. So the forecast for your budget is derived from the traffic or the engagement or the conversions that are already in your analytics data. Take that data out, forecast it, forecast with whatever you've got for however much data you've got as far ahead as you can with that 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio. And then look at your attribution models to decide what priority are each of the channels. How much do you need to invest, right? If email is 70% of your conversions and you're investing 90% of your time, you may need to throttle back on it. If you're investing 4% of your time, you need to increase your staffing on it. That's a good way to determine what should have priority. And then from there, build your action plan. Okay, what are the things you have that can drive referral traffic or email traffic or social media traffic? Based on what you already have, use the modern tools that are available, AI-based tools, to dramatically increase your productivity. That way you can be more places without having to necessarily be more people.
And, to do the hard pitch, because that's who we are. If you want help figuring out any of this stuff, you can go to trustinsights.ai/contact and talk to the one and only John Wall. He may even do a dance. But he can help, get you sorted in terms of, do I have enough data to be running a predictive forecast, or can Trust Insights run a predictive forecast for me using other data sources to help me understand what I should be doing next with my marketing? There's a lot of different ways to approach answering this question.
Exactly right. Any final thoughts before we forecast what's next?
Ouch.
I forecast getting back to work. That's my forecast.
I would say don't make hasty decisions. Make sure you're really exploring your data to understand what's going on, and then, set your budgets, commit to spending money. It's fun to just do stuff, but then maybe it was the wrong thing. So definitely take the time to do this type of analysis.
All right, that's going to do it for this week. So we'll see you next week, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.